Prairie View A&M head coach Tremaine Jackson explains his recruiting style and takes a shot at LSU head coach Brian Kelly along the way. Oh yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Today's episode will be brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay with us for the Armada Team of the Week later this episode. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at the CIAA tournament, both the men's and women's side of the bracket. In segment 2, Norfolk State women's basketball is on their pursuit to perfection with only one thing in their way. I want to preview their game against Howard in segment 2. But this was interesting. It was very interesting to see a Tremaine Jackson interview in which he took a shot at a top-notch Louisiana head coach, and it wasn't Grambling, it wasn't Southern, it was not a team that he will be facing, which we could argue is probably the smarter choice. You don't want to give anybody any bulletin board material, but instead he took a shot at LSU head coach Brian Kelly. Tremaine Jackson has not coached his first game at Prairie View A&M yet. He's had a very decorated Division II coaching career, and I think that he was a fantastic hire. I'm going to be honest with you. I thought that this move was a little bit odd. I thought that it was a little bit odd to see Tremaine Jackson take a shot at Brian Kelly, of all people, especially in the context of the quote, where I don't think that it was necessary. It did a good job explaining his point of what his recruiting style was, but I didn't think that it was necessary to add that last sentence or two on the quote. Let me read it to you. He said, "We don't wine and dine guys in recruiting. We give it to you straight up because I don't have time to de-recruit you. You're not going to catch me on Twitter with my hat backwards and dancing on the 360 with guys. Brian Kelly did that, and he ain't won a championship yet. You're not going to catch me on Twitter with my hat backwards and dancing on the 360 with guys. Brian Kelly did that, and he ain't won a championship yet." I think the quick retort would be, well, Tremaine Jackson hasn't won a championship either. I think he opens himself up for that type of comment. Right? I think when you say this guy did this and he hasn't won a championship, you probably should have a championship on your resume. Otherwise, you open yourself up to being kind of, I don't want to say hypocritical, but you would hear the retort of, you're not really in a place to say that. But I'll be honest with you. I think that if somebody were to point out the lack of championship, I think they would be right in doing that because I don't think that this last comment was necessary. I do not believe that Tremaine Jackson had to take a shot at Brian Kelly to explain his recruiting strategy. And, I mean, Brian Kelly ain't going to lose no sleep over it. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. And if Brian Kelly responds, I don't think that Tremaine Jackson will lose any sleep over it. This is not a huge deal. Just one that I was like, that was an interesting shot to take. But anywho, the reason I thought that it was uncalled for is because it paints a light of this is good, this is bad, when I really think that these are just two different recruiting strategies. For him to basically say it hasn't resulted in a championship, so I'm not doing it, I think it's more so this just isn't your style. This just is not Tremaine Jackson's style to do things in this capacity. But do I believe that it is bad? No. LSU was on their way to having a phenomenal recruiting class, this past recruiting class, until, NIL and bidding wars and all of that stuff happened. I think the Bryce Underwood, Michigan is the most notable one, but then you also have DK Moore in Oregon. Like the NIL is changing the landscape, but LSU still got a pretty good recruiting class. And do I know how many guys were on the 360 with Brian Kelly? No, I don't. But I do believe that he has showcased the ability to recruit well. And that's really what it's about. It's not about, hey, I mean, yes, it's about championships, but it's also about how many guys you able to pull in. How many recruits are you able to pull in by doing this? The reason I actually stand against Tremaine Jackson on this is because I think it's good. Like, if I had to pick a side, I think it's just different styles. But if I had to pick a side, I would say that I like what Brian Kelly is doing because he's meeting these young athletes in a place where they already are. These athletes love the little 360, or the kids of that age loved the 360s. And guess what? The players are of that age. It's fun to them. It makes them feel like they want to pour into this I want to say community. This program? I liked it. I'm a substitute teacher, right? And I was talking to one of the teachers about trying to pitch his program to the incoming kids of that grade. And he was going to ask me for some assistance, but I had to get to him a little bit later. And I was talking to him, and he already had an idea that came from the students that, hey, why don't we do this TikTok trend? That's meeting these kids where they are, because you know what? These fourth graders love them some doggone TikTok. It ain't my cup of tea, but they love them some freaking TikTok. So why not meet them with a TikTok trend that they can grab onto? I thought that it was a phenomenal idea, and that is just what I feel like Brian Kelly was doing. Taking something that is popular, something that kids of that age like, and trying to relate. I know it doesn't criticize Tremaine Jackson for not doing that. But I think that was the issue to me, is that I didn't need to make one a problem in order to make myself look better. And I kind of feel like that's what Tremaine Jackson did in this specific situation. Or maybe he just really doesn't like this. Maybe he really doesn't like it. And we have a quote that could explain why all of that flashiness irritates him. First and foremost, his motto is dog. And everybody says, I'm a dog, I'm a dog, I'm a dog, I'm a dog, right? But it's discipline, obedience, and grit. Ain't nothing gritty about being on a 360 with the high school athletes. Ain't nothing about that. There's nothing gritty about it. But if your motto is dog, with that being the acronym, it makes sense why you wouldn't really want to fall in line with this. But let's go another step further about his time in Valdosta, the first season that he was with the school. The very first season he was with the school, he tells this story. We didn't have any scholarship money, so I tried something different. I don't like players to wear jewelry on the field. Let's stop right there. He doesn't like players wearing jewelry on the field. Like, you just have to look at certain traits that line up with certain traits, and it just makes sense when you start doing it this way, right? Anyway, I don't like players wearing jewelry on the field, so I said they could wear jewelry during the game if they didn't wear it during the week. That was dumb of Tremaine Jackson. We didn't perform on game day, and once you make a deal, you can't go back on it because you'll lose everybody. But you hear how you spoke about it? That was dumb of Tremaine Jackson. And I do believe that doing these interactive type of actions with recruits is very similar to letting them wear jewelry on the field. It's a little bit more free. When you say discipline, when obedience is a part of your motto, I think that there is a more rigid structure that is going to be involved with that coach. I don't have to know that person personally, but I would say if obedience is in your motto and you're talking about college athletes, you are probably a very rigid leader. It needs to be this way. Like, right, I don't have a problem with that. And I think that I'm trying to be careful because I don't want to seem like I'm criticizing, because I'm not. The only thing I criticized was the idea that you had to take a shot at Brian Kelly to prove your point. But other than that, okay, that you don't have to be the guy who's going to do the latest trend. You don't have to be the guy who's going to do some of the younger people things to relate to the younger people. He said it straight up. I'm not going to try to de-recruit you. I don't necessarily know if that is de-recruiting, but I've never been recruited. So who am I to say what is and what isn't? I always looked at wine and dining as part of the recruiting process because everybody's doing it and you're trying to show why you are the best platform. But I think for Tremaine Jackson, he's saying if you're not already sold on another program, then my approach should sell you. And maybe that's true. Look at what he did with Valdosta. Look what he did in years 2 and 3. Like, that is something that we have to acknowledge, that his way has worked. See, I could say he doesn't have a championship on his resume, but he's gotten closer than Brian Kelly has. I will say that. He has gotten closer. He was in a championship game last year. There's many people at LSU who are unhappy and unsatisfied with how far that Brian Kelly has taken it. I'm just saying. I wanted to make sure I add that part as well. When I'm talking about matters of that other school, Prairie View, I try to make sure that I'm completely fair and not seem like I'm being biased, because I have a thing about people always thinking folks is biased. I think I talked about that on yesterday or the day before. But overall, if you take the Brian Kelly shot out of it, this does a really good job of exemplifying who Tremaine Jackson is as a head coach and as a recruiter. He said, I'm not going to whine and dine. Straight up, this is who we are. This is how we can help develop. I think I seen something else in this article that basically made it seem like that's a real relationship. That's not it's not fraudulent. It's not makeup, right? This is just truly natural. This is what it is. So I understand why he feels the way that he feels. And I mean, at the end of the day, everybody isn't going to take that approach. Everybody isn't going to take that approach. For some people, they're going to do hashtags. It's a social media world. For some people, they're going to try to do those things. For Tremaine Jackson, he's probably going to tell you, look at what I did at Valdosta. And if you look at what he did at Valdosta, you probably would say, this guy knows what he's doing. He can take me to high places. So let's push forward. Oh, also, let me just say this, because that was a very confident thing to do. This is the same guy who, when he was at Colorado Mesa, said, yeah, you can go ahead and schedule Colorado School of Mines. I'm going to beat them flat out. And then they scheduled him for homecoming, which wasn't what he said, but they beat him that next year at homecoming. It's the first time that Colorado Mesa had ever beaten a top 5 nationally ranked program. So this guy is not short on confidence. He's not short on things that back up his confidence either. So if he wants to, take shots at LSU's head coach, I guess that's what he'll do as he pushes forward. Pursuit of perfection. That is what Norfolk State women's basketball has been on all season long. But now they're only one game away with their biggest rival standing in the way. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. What? As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I went straight to the intro. This is a lead segment. Maybe that's why I did that. Now I'm about to say, play my music. Anyway, don't play my music. Let's continue rolling with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Nissan, and the team of the week is brought to you by the 2025 Nissan Armada. Each week, our Locked On college basketball experts are picking one team that stands apart from top-seeded stars to unexpected upsets. These guys showcase their strength and sheer power needed to push their teams forward. So this week's Armadas and clear-cut team of the week are the Houston Cougars. Shout out to the team across Scott. Since joining the Big 12 last season, the Cougars have gone a combined 33-4 in conference games, winning the regular season title by multiple games in both years. There's no team in college basketball that more capably embodies the rugged Armada than Kelvin Sampson's squad. Shout out to Parker. If you never checked out Locked On Cougs, please do. It's clear that our team of the week is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of Nissan's outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Cougs. Matter of fact, if you haven't checked it out, go ahead and do that after this, because Parker puts up great work. I've been there a couple of times. We've chopped it up outside of the show a couple of times. Phenomenal work. So go check out Locked On Cougs today. This is segment 2. I know I treated it like an intro. I treated it like we're going into segment 1 at the end of segment 1. But you know what? This is a lead segment. Everybody can't be number 1, but this is a lead type of segment. I wanted to make sure that I got this in because, as you go on through the week and you start stacking out your topics and you think you know what you're going to talk about, then breaking news happens and something changed and plots change. But I needed to get this done by Thursday to preview the Norfolk State versus Howard basketball game. And I didn't want it to get lost because this topic is too important, it's too big, it's too good. Norfolk State women's basketball has dominated the MEAC over the last 4 seasons. You're looking at a team that won the MEAC tournament the last 2 years. They won the regular season title outright last year. The 2 years prior to that, they were having a share of the MEAC regular season title. So they've been a top-notch team for the last 4 years. By the way, they've already clinched a share of the regular season title this season. So that would make 4 in a row. But the one thing that they haven't done in that 4 years, matter of fact, the one thing they haven't done since the 1990-91 season is have a perfect conference record. They're one game away from that. And the only team that stands in their way is the biggest rival they have in the Mid-Eastern Athletic Conference. That's the Howard Bison. Norfolk State versus Howard is a game that you're going to circle twice a year, every single year. I talked to Wheeler. I talked to Kierra Wheeler. This game means more. The rivalry means something. And that's important because there's a reason that we highlight this game. And it just so happens that the one team that could stand in your way of perfection is the one team that has stood in your way of a championship over the last couple of years. Now, granted, you took that obstacle last year, took that obstacle the year before that. So it's not as if they can't beat them. As a matter of fact, the one time that they played this season, it was a shockingly comfortable win for Norfolk State. It was. I was surprised at how comfortable that win was. If I had to say something to dress it up, because I don't want to say Norfolk State is just dominant. No need to watch this game if Norfolk State is just that dominant. Howard was the last team to keep, and the only team to keep Norfolk State under 70 points in a game. I mean, if that counts for anything, Howard, man, it's kind of where the list stops. It was a comfortable victory because though they didn't get up to 70 points, you're still looking at Diamond Johnson with 24, 8, and 7. You're looking at Kierra Wheeler with 17 and 11, I believe. It was definitely a 17-point double-double. I think it was 11 boards she had. So you're looking at a very top-notch game from your stars. I think Debria Clark chimed in with about double-digit points, 10, 11 of her own. So you still got loose there. You still got your top players loose, and you got an accessory, because the way I look at it is you have two players on Norfolk State who you're worried about as the stars. And then you have a bunch of players who could come in and give you some work. It doesn't mean that they're going to go off for 30 on a consistent basis, but it does mean that you have to watch out for a Clark. You have to watch out for a Fields. You have to watch out for players like that who could come in and give you a lot of points, could come in and facilitate, get rebound. Like, they have quality players at different categories that you have to be concerned about. That's why they're the best team. But the thing is, if Norfolk State can go undefeated, if they can knock off Howard, and I'm not writing this game in pen as a Norfolk State women's basketball victory or Norfolk State perfect season. I'm not writing this in pen as a Norfolk State victory. But if they are able to come up with a win, then you take a perfect conference record and you pair that with a victory over Missouri, a victory over Auburn. That's two SEC Power 4 schools that they defeated in out-of-conference play. They also additionally have a win over Wyoming. So now you're looking at and I got to keep saying this is a great season for Norfolk State no matter what. But if they're able to defeat Howard on Thursday, if they're able to complete their perfect MEAC season, something they have never done. They've never done this in a MEAC. If they're able to accomplish this feat, you would pair a perfect conference record with a couple of strong out-of-conference victories, including two Power 4 wins over Auburn, over Missouri, and then also a win over Wyoming, which isn't a Power 4, but that is still a huge win for Norfolk State. As we will be leading into the MEAC tournament, you don't want to turn your brain on to Big Dance, but I will, because I'm not playing the game. That's a really high seed because they've dominated throughout the conference play. They won multiple big-time matchups in out-of-conference play. You would have to start thinking, you may be looking at I don't want to get out of hand. 14 is definitely on the table. The 14th seed would definitely be on the table if they ran through the MEAC undefeated, had those 3 victories, and won the MEAC tournament. Might even get 13. I don't know. That might be a little too much. But 14 is definitely on the table. Now, as we push forward, speaking of people being on the table, let's talk about championships that have been put on the table. Let's talk about people who are going to the big dance, because the CIAA produced 2 champions over the weekend, and I want to break them down as we close out today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy to use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry leading service. So you'll always talk to a real person. I hate all of that AI talking to bot stuff, man. Give me the real person. And for the trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. That's supplyhouse.com/TM. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com/TM. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked on HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. I've had a lot of fun doing today's episode. I love the lead up to it. I don't love the lead up to every episode. I'm going to be honest with you. I love peeling back the curtain. I love telling y'all what's going on backstage. I don't love every episode. Sometimes I don't love the prep and I go in there and it's a great episode. Sometimes I love the prep and it's a crappy episode. I will tell you what, this does not fall in either category. I enjoyed today's episode. I enjoyed the lead up to it, and I hope that you are enjoying the watching or the listening, just the consuming of the episode in general. But the CIAA has crowned 2 champions, Fayetteville State and also Virginia State. Virginia State was hoping that they would be a 2-time champion, hoping that they could sweep the CIAA tournament. Unfortunately, that was not in the cards. I would say this, everything was leading up to a Virginia State versus Fayetteville State doubleheader. And I think we've seen that before. I can't remember when, but I feel like at the CIAA tournament in the last 3 years, we've seen a men's and women's finals of the same 2 squads. That was almost the case this year. The reason I said that it's been leading up to a Virginia State versus Fayettille State is because look at the regular season and you look at the tournament. You look at the regular season, these are the 1 seeds in both the North and the South, both on the women's side and the men's side. You look at the tournament, they made it to the semifinals. Both sides made it to the semifinals. Now, where things changed is that Fayettille State men's basketball fell to Bluefield in the semis. So we didn't get it on both sides, but we did get it on the women's side, and it went in the favor of Fayettille State, which if you follow this season, I'm not going to say is unsurprising, but it is what happened when these 2 teams faced off earlier in the year. Virginia State finished the year 9-1 in their division, 14-2 in the conference. Fayettille State gave them one of those losses, and it's the only time that they squared off. Fayettille State went 9-1. They finished 13-3. So that 14-2 versus 13-3 may change a lot of things for you. It may make you look at things a different kind of way. But that's neck and neck. And if I'm looking at the one team and I'm looking at the path of it, Fayettille State has some weird losses. Like they lost to Lincoln. Can y'all hear that? Can y'all hear the wind blowing? I have to tell you what it was in case you couldn't. Then it just sounds like I'm schizophrenic. Y'all hearing that? But anyway, the point is, Fayettille State has some odd losses where Lincoln, Elizabeth City State, they're 2 of the lesser teams in the North Division. That's kind of odd that you lost to them. And then you lost to Livingstone, who was second in your division, the South. That's a little bit more understandable, but it's odd when you look at Fayettille State. But if you look at the victories, they knocked off Virginia Union. They knocked off Virginia State, which are 2 of the squads the 2 squads who are at 1-2 in the North. I could spin it and say that it was this big 3, but Virginia Union lost to Virginia State twice this year. They lost to Fayettille State the only time they played. So I didn't really think that it was correct to call them a big 3. Forget the big 3. It's just big me. It's just big Fayettille. That's ironic. Anyway, that's ironic. But Fayettille State, they knocked off Union during the season. They knocked off Virginia State during the season. So this isn't as if they couldn't beat top-notch talent. It's not as if they shouldn't have been looked at as the favorite, honestly, because they took the harder route, right? They had to face Union, they had to face State again, and they beat them again. It was good games, don't get me wrong, but Fayetteville State women's basketball was obviously the top dog. They were obviously the top dog on the route, and then they were en route to securing their second straight CIAA championship. So to me, I was kind of surprised. If you look at the CIAA website, their official website, it would say that Kiana McLaughlin is not the championship game MVP. That surprised me that she's not the tournament MVP. I think that she could have been both. Now, I did hear that she was the tournament MVP at a different place, or excuse me, the game MVP on a different site, but I'm going to go with the official CIAA. And if they made a mistake, they just going to make a mistake. And I'm going off of them and I'm going to cite them. I'm just saying, I'm going to cite them. Anywho, I thought the McLaughlin, I thought that Fayetteville State on en route to their championship, they didn't have one player who just stood out amongst the rest. I thought that they had a revolving door of players who stood out in different games, but I believe that McLaughlin's game leading 15 points, her game leading, or tie for game leading to be fair, but game leading rebounds with 8. I thought that was enough in a game, in a championship game. I thought that was enough to swing her being the tournament MVP as well as being the game MVP. Then on the CIAA men's side, Virginia State did get their championship there. So they were going for the sweep. They ended up going 1 of 2. They still got a championship though. Nothing's worse than going for the sweep and actually getting locked out. But on the men's side, it was Virginia State. It was Virginia State versus Bluefield State. And the Trojans came out with a victory, like I mentioned. I want to highlight a couple of stretches. There were 2 4-minute stretches in which 4+ minute stretches in which the lockdown defense of Virginia State was on clear display. At 13 minutes left, it was 45-46 by way of Virginia State. At 9 minutes left, it was 48-51. That's not a big swing. Like, don't get me wrong. That's a 5-3 run. It's nothing. That's just both teams playing defense. But you see that it's kind of like a baby step. There was even a step earlier where it was about 2.5 minutes where it was a similar type of stretch, but I didn't think that was enough time to really, and it was really close to the 13-minute mark. I didn't think it was enough time to showcase what I meant. But you're looking at them holding Bluefield State to only 1 bucket over the course of a few minutes. Now, here comes the one where you really see the difference, and that's the one that closes out the game, just like this is about to close out the show. It was 62-57. Now Virginia State is losing. That was 5 minutes and 42 seconds left. The final score was 64-71. So now that's a 14-2 stretch. That's a completely different ball game. That's a completely different situation where you're highlighting. See, people ain't even gonna highlight a 5-2. That's mean both teams were kind of missing. But I look at that. And I look at that baby one that I didn't mention earlier, and I'm seeing stretches in which Virginia State is playing lockdown defense and not even allowing them to get more than 1 bucket. It was a 2.5 to 3 minute stretch where they only got 1 bucket. There was a 4-minute stretch where they only got 1 bucket. And there was a near 6-minute stretch where they only had 1 bucket. If you're just looking at that together, let's say 2.5, 4, and then 6. You're looking at 12.5 minutes where they scored 6 points. That was not consecutive, no, but that showcases how dominant of a defensive display that Virginia State had put on. That was really good defense. And I know in general, they dropped the point total from 35 to like 29, but those separate stretches really told the story, especially that last 5 minutes and 42. That would have been enough to highlight, but I didn't want to do that. Now, next week, I think Sunday, you'll get, y'all have to hear this. But anyway, Sunday, you will get the results in who is going to be in what spot in the Big Dance. So now they're going to go to the Division II tournament. Fayetteville State was able to take it to the Sweet 16 last year. Let's see what they can do in 25. Let's see what Virginia State could do in 25. But I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. On tomorrow's episode, we're going to preview, because Thursday is actually a huge day. So we might do it around the HBCU or just the biggest games at least. I can think of 2 to 3 games that I want to put a spotlight on. And I may do another. Probably won't do another spotlight on Norfolk State versus Howard women's basketball, but This is big time games coming up on Thursday in both the SWAC and the MEAC. Let's talk about this on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.